Harlem doesn't always warn you with sirens. Sometimes it all starts with a single shove, and the air turns different. Bumpy Johnson's 12-year-old son was just standing by a corner store, a coin in his hand. And then Eli Nail Caruso walked past, the kind of man who's used to people stepping aside. This is the channel Untold Legends of Crime Bosses, and this is a story about how a small gesture can turn into a full-scale gang war. Because in Harlem, you can't lay a hand on anything that carries the name Johnson without consequences. And if you do, be ready to pay. Chapter 1. The Hand That Had No Right to Move. 1012. There are things in a city that happen without sound. No sirens, no headlines. Just a click. And after it, the air is different. 1018. Harlem was ordinary that day. That matters, because big stories almost always start with ordinary, with open windows, with the smell of oil and onions, with dominoes on a milk crate, with kids running like the street belongs to them by birthright. 1021 Bumpy Johnson's son was there, 12 years old, an age when a boy has learned to look straight ahead, but hasn't yet learned that for certain looks, grown men pay with their lives. He stood by the corner store, a coin in his hand, rolling it between his fingers. He wasn't looking for trouble. He wasn't calling it over. He was just part of the block, like bricks, like the fire escape, like the shadow of the water tower. 1026 Eli Nail Caruso stepped into the frame the way men step in when they're used to the street giving them room. He wasn't a tourist. Tourists look up. Caruso looks straight, at people, at doors, at corners, like property. 1027. He had two with him, not friends, an escort. Men like that don't laugh. Men like that stand half a step behind and pretend nothing is happening until everything is. 1029. Caruso didn't come for the boy. He came for business, for money, for somebody else's dispute, one that, in his world, got settled with voice and shoulder. But the city doesn't always let you choose your addressee. 1031. The sidewalk by the store was tight. The boy stepped aside. Too late. Not right. Not fast enough to satisfy a man people had been yielding to his whole life. 1032 Caruso stopped, and the stopping itself was violence, because when a man like that stops, the street has to understand why. First, a word, quiet, sticky, with a foreign accent. Then, a hand, 1033, not a punch, not a beating, a shove, a dry, confident shove, palm to chest, like pushing the air out of a room. The boy flew back into the wall. His shoulder hit brick. The coin slipped and clinked on the concrete. Clink, a small sound, but Harlem listens to small sounds. 1034, the boy didn't cry. People noticed. He straightened up slowly, like he'd been practicing all his life, though he was only 12. He looked at Caruso, not pleading, not afraid. With that level, grown silence kids only have when they've seen it at home. Caruso smirked. Men like that always smirk when they think they've won without effort, and he kept walking. 1035. He didn't look back. That was a mistake too, because Harlem isn't a place where events live only where they happened. Information doesn't walk here. It seeps. Through pauses, through looks, through the way a woman on the stoop stops speaking mid-sentence. 1041. Someone said hey too quietly. Someone picked up the coin and handed it back to the boy without smiling. Someone went inside and made one call, and 15 minutes later, on the other end of the block, two words got said that make even grown men start choosing their phrasing. Bumpy, son. 1109. At the same time, Detective Hughes sat in a car on a cross street, like he'd simply parked. Usually cops look like cops. Hughes looked like a man trying to look like nobody. 11:11. He didn't notice the shove right away. He noticed the reaction, the way movement changed on the sidewalk, the way two men by the barbershop door went quiet, the way one teenager broke and ran, not to his friends, but to the payphone. 11:12, Hughes smiled, not because he was amused, because he loved moments when order starts to crack. He reached for his radio, but didn't key it. Too early. Let it grow. Let people get nervous. Let somebody take one extra step. Then you walk in, holding the law. Hughes knew how to wait, but he didn't know that in Harlem there are men who wait better. 12:03. The boy went home, not at a run. He walked slow, holding himself straight, the way his father held himself when he moved down the street, like time belonged to him. 12:06. His mother didn't scream. She didn't make a scene. She just listened, wiped the dust off his shoulder, and made one call. Only one. The voice on the other end didn't ask who. The voice on the other end asked where. 13:21. An hour later, Ellsworth Raymond Johnson sat by the window in his office, the lamplight lying across a page of a book he wasn't reading. They told him everything. Short, clean, no decoration. 13:23. Bumpy didn't raise his voice, didn't hit the desk, didn't crush a glass, didn't say, "I'll kill him." He just stayed silent so long, the man across from him began to feel small. Not out of fear, but from understanding that the silence in this room weighed more than shouting in any other. Then Bumpy nodded once, and that was the answer. 13:26. He stood, went to the window, and looked out at the street. Harlem moved, breathed, pretended everything was as usual. But Bumpy saw something else. He saw the question now hanging between the buildings like laundry on a line. Can you touch what carries his name? He said it quietly, like he was speaking to himself. Find me that Italian. Pause. And the one who thinks he can walk here like the owner. 13:31. Outside, where people were already starting to talk in whispers, Harlem did what it always does before a storm. It didn't raise a fuss. It just moved the chairs closer to the walls. 13:34. And somewhere far off, Caruso was still going about his day, wearing the same expression of a man who doesn't know his day is already over. Chapter 2. The Street Takes Its Exam. 1602. In Harlem, news doesn't shout. It changes the way people walk. Some start moving closer to the walls. Some drift closer to the middle of the sidewalk, like they're testing who'll yield first. And some just stop laughing, where they laughed yesterday. 1611. Mel Green showed up on the corner without a crew. Not for swagger, for precision. He stopped by a storefront window that hadn't reflected merchandise in a long time, only faces. Looked at his reflection, then at the street, and saw what he'd come to see. 1614. The outsiders walked steady, not in a hurry, the way men walk when they want to be noticed. Two up front, one a little behind, and another pair somewhere at the edge of sight. Nothing obvious, no shouting, no gestures. That was the nerve of it, nerve in calm. 1618. They weren't asking for directions. They were taking the neighborhood's temperature, and the neighborhood felt it. The barber shop went quiet for a second. Even the clippers fell silent, like somebody yanked the cord. In the diner, a woman wiped down a table that was already clean. By the club door, the bouncer stopped letting people in for a couple minutes, like the air needed counting. 1621. Mel made one call. Not "we need more people," not "send somebody," just "he out?" 1622. The answer was short. Yeah, that was all. 1637. Bumpy appeared like he hadn't appeared at all. No sharpness, no everybody look. Just a man in an overcoat walking his block the way a man walks through his own house. His face was calm, but calm isn't softness. Calm is control. 1640. He didn't ask, "Where are they?" He already saw. The outsiders stood by a newsstand, pretending to read, but they held the paper too high. That's how you hold a shield, not newsprint. Bumpy came closer, and the street did what it always does when a serious conversation is about to happen. It got a little quieter so it could hear breathing. 1641. One of them, the one with the close-set eyes, looked at Bumpy and smiled. Too confident, too wide. That kind of smile isn't joy. That kind of smile is an attempt to put a period at the end of somebody else's sentence. 1642. Bumpy stopped at the distance where a handshake is possible, but not required. He said gently, "You lost?" The man smirked. "Us? No. We're just taking a walk." He said taking a walk like it meant checking. 1643. Bumpy nodded like he accepted the answer. And then he did the thing that breaks plans without raising his voice. He didn't look at the speaker. He looked at his hands. Hands talk first. The tongue lies longer. The man's fingers trembled slightly at the edge of the paper, not from fear, from expectation. 1644. Mel stepped closer, not threatening, just shortening the distance to the truth. The guy in back coughed, and there was more command in that cough than in any order. 1645. And that's when the street slipped its leash. Not like the movies. No pretty punches, no heroics. Just an elbow showing up where it didn't belong. A shoulder checking forward. A hand that tried to pull something from under a jacket and didn't get the chance to show it to the world. Bumpy caught the wrist. Fast, no fuss. The way you close a desk drawer. He didn't twist, didn't teach a lesson in anatomy. He just held it so it was clear. Next would be worse, and it wouldn't be his choice. 1646. We don't take walks like that here, he said quietly, and he let go. Letting go is a hit too, if you let go the right way. The outsider stepped back to save face, but the face was already gone, because he'd been stopped without noise, and noise was what they'd been counting on. 1647. One of theirs tried to shove Mel. Mel didn't fall, not because he was stronger, because he didn't want to fall. He clipped him short, no wind-up, not for pain, for the message. The man folded, grabbing for air. Nobody around clapped. Nobody yelled. They just watched the way you watch someone fix wiring. The important thing is that sparks don't jump through the whole house. 1649. Bumpy stepped aside, opening a lane. It was an invitation to leave, and it was humiliation. They left, not running. Running is admission. They walked off slow, trying to look like this was how it was meant to go. But Harlem doesn't remember speed. Harlem remembers who made who move. 1718. Detective Hughes heard about the scuffle before the report. He didn't need the report. He needed the fallout. He stood by the phone in the precinct, listening as one patrolman told another, "It was quiet, but..." Hughes loved but. 1723. He went outside and got into a car, not the one with the lights, the one that doesn't earn respect and doesn't earn hate. Hate gets in the way of the job too. It makes people smarter. 1731. Hughes knew one thing. After a shove like that, there's always a shove back. And a cop needs to be close not to the cause, but to the moment when people start making mistakes. He didn't drive to Bumpy. He drove to the ones who serviced Bumpy, the ones who carried, the ones who drove, the ones too young to know the price of an extra pocket. 1806. Mel came back to Bumpy's office. "They're probing," he said, "and they're not alone." Bumpy turned a page of his book without looking. "Eli?" "Not yet, but it's his handwriting. They want us to snap first." 1809. Bumpy lifted his eyes. "We don't snap," he said. "It wasn't a promise. It was a rule." Then he added, "Let everybody know, no guns tonight." Mel froze for a second. "Even ours?" "Especially ours." 1810. Mel got it. If Hughes came, he'd come for iron. If there was no iron, he'd be left with empty hands and anger. And a cop's anger is currency, too. You can spend it against him. 1812. Bumpy closed the book. "Find me a place where Caruso thinks he's safe." "We're already looking." "Not already. Find it." 1813. Mel nodded and walked out. 1904. Across town, Caruso ate in a restaurant where the white tablecloths smelled like other people's money. He laughed loud. He acted like the morning shove had been nothing but a hand moving. But a hand is something that gets remembered. And the louder a man laughs, the more he's trying to drown out his own calculation. 1907. Someone leaned in and whispered something. Caruso stopped laughing for half a second. Half a second is long enough for a face to tell the truth. Then he smiled again and raised his glass. But now he drank more carefully than he had before. 1941. Back in Harlem, doors closed a little earlier. Music played a little softer. People said, "See you tomorrow," like tomorrow still had to be earned. Bumpy stood by the window, and he wasn't thinking about how to punish. He was thinking about how to restore balance without letting anyone mistake it for weakness. Outside, the wind chased a scrap of paper along the pavement, and it kept slapping the curb again and again like a thought that can't find a way out. 1944. Somewhere nearby, Detective Hughes was looking out a window too, waiting too, because in stories like this, almost everybody waits. The only question is who will outwait who. Chapter 3. The tab is closed, 2108. Night in Harlem isn't darker, it's just closer. By day, the street makes noise so it can seem alive. By night, it goes quiet so it can seem honest. 2117. Bumpy didn't gather people for a show. A show is what you put on when you're not sure you'll be heard. He chose a club because a club is where everybody pretends they're relaxed, which means you can see who can't pretend. The music ran smooth. Smoke lay in layers. Glasses rang like somebody was paying them for it. 2126. Mel stood by the wall counting entrances, not doors, options. "There'll be movement tonight," he said, not looking at Bumpy. Bumpy adjusted his cuff. "There'll be order tonight, he said. The difference between those words is what people die for. 2139 Caruso, meanwhile, wasn't heading to the club. They told him it was easy. They told him one man wanted to close the dispute quietly. They told him the money would be in the car and nobody would ask questions. Caruso liked quiet, when quiet meant no consequences. 2142. He watched the window and thought about how fast a neighborhood forgets, and how easy it is to make people remember again. Thoughts like that make a man brave. Right up until somebody changes the route. 2151. A block from the club, a shop sign went dark. Not the whole thing, just one letter. A small thing. But small things are often the signal. Mel saw it, and Bumpy saw that Mel saw it. That was the system. Everybody reading everybody else, so nobody has to explain. 2154A car appeared by the club entrance that had no business being there. Not because it was expensive, because it was sure of itself. Confidence in somebody else's neighborhood is a weapon. 2201. The first sound wasn't a gunshot. The first sound was the music stopping. The DJ didn't understand what happened, but his hands did the right thing on their own, killed the sound so it wouldn't get in the way of hearing. Silence hit the room harder than any punch. 2202. Then the noise came. Chairs, shouts, glass, security trying to be a wall, and suddenly realizing a wall is a target too. People dropped to the floor, not because they'd been trained, because the floor is the only place you're invisible for a second. 2203. Bumpy didn't bolt for the exit. Men who bolt admit they've been driven. He stepped up one stair to see the room and gave security a gesture, short as a comma. Not hit, not kill. Separate. Mel was already moving, ushering out women and anyone who hadn't come for war. Places like that always have people who came just to hear music, and they're the ones somebody pays for afterward. 2205. The attackers wanted panic. Panic makes people stupid and alone. But Harlem had been trained for something else. It had been trained by Bumpy. Somebody shut the side door. Somebody killed the lights in one half of the room. Somebody lifted a man off the floor without asking his name. That isn't heroism. That's discipline. 2214. When the noise started to drain away, you could hear breathing. That's always the scariest moment, when you know you're alive, but you still don't know what comes next. Bumpy crossed the room slow. He wasn't hunting a victory. He was hunting the guilty man who thought he'd stayed unseen. 2216. By the entrance, a hat lay on the floor. Expensive, not from here. And beside it, a man who had no reason to be that close to the door if he'd come just to watch. Mel bent down, looked at his face. Not ours, Mel said. Then he came by the rules of men who believe there are no rules, Bumpy said. 2303. Detective Hughes showed up too late, like always. Not because he was slow, because reality doesn't have to adjust itself to the law. Sirens cut the street, but inside the club, there was already different music. The music of people gathering consequences piece by piece. 2306 Hughes spotted Bumpy at the exit. Heard you got noisy in here, he said. Bumpy looked at him the way you look at a watch, not with hate, but checking accuracy. The city's always noisy, detective. I'm looking for who started it. A beginning isn't an event. It's a habit, Bumpy said. And you know that. Hughes wanted to step closer, but men stood nearby who weren't police and weren't a crowd. They were a border. Hughes understood. Tonight, he'd take only the scent, and you don't carry scents into court. 018. They found Caruso somewhere other than where he thought he'd hide. They didn't drag him into the street for a spectacle. They brought him to a place whose walls had heard plenty of promises, and even more refusals. The room was plain. A table, 2 chairs, light that doesn't flatter. 021, Caruso sat straight. Men like that sit straight even when everything inside them has gone crooked. I didn't touch your boy, he said at once. A lie that starts as defense ends as confession. Bumpy sat across from him. Not close, not far. At the distance of a deal. 022, you did, Bumpy said. No emotion, like stating the weather. Caruso swallowed. It was a shove, nothing. 023. Bumpy leaned forward a little. In Harlem, nothing is what everything starts with, he said. You did it in front of people. Caruso tried to smirk, but his face didn't back him up. People will forget. 024. Bumpy shook his head. Kids don't forget. Then they grow up, and they start remembering the right way. Pause. You didn't understand where you were. 025. Caruso tensed. So what now? Bumpy looked at his hands. The same hands that decided that morning they could move however they wanted. Now you disappear from my air, Bumpy said. 026. He didn't say, you'll die. He didn't say, we'll break you. He said it the way power speaks when it files a decision. You're leaving, and you're not coming back here. And if I do? Bumpy raised his eyes. Then it won't be a conversation anymore. 103. Rizzo didn't come to Harlem. Rizzo sent a word. Men like that keep their words neat, because words like that cost. The word was simple: compensation. 106. Bumpy answered with a word too. Not money, not peace. Rules. And that word cost the most. 141 morning arrived like a bill you can't put off. Shops opened, old men came out. Somebody knocked domino bones against a tabletop again. But people walked different now. Not freer, sharper. 148 Bumpy's son sat on the steps, rolling a new coin between his fingers. The same habit, a different meaning. Bumpy came over and sat beside him, not as a boss, but as a father. You okay? He asked. The boy nodded. I didn't fall, he said. 149. Bumpy looked out at the street. I know. He let the silence sit a moment. The main thing is, don't let them decide who you become after. The boy nodded again, like he understood more than a 12-year-old should. 207. Detective Hughes wrote something in his notebook. Not evidence, not facts. Names, times, pauses. Because he understood too. In stories like this, what matters isn't the blows. It's the gaps between them. He closed the notebook and told himself, next time. 2:19. Harlem kept living. Caruso vanished from the neighborhood's air the way men vanish who mistake the map for the territory. Rizzo recounted his words. Hughes recounted his moves. And Bumpy did what the most durable men do, not the cruelest. He gave the neighborhood its sense of a boundary back. Because power isn't when you can strike. Power is when nobody dares raise a hand. The end.